Welcome to Women in AI Summit 2020, and thank you for tuning in for India's session, The Art of Crafting Inclusive AI Products. I am Namrata Mukhija, Women in AI leads Delhi, India, and a software engineer at Microsoft. I am thrilled to announce to you the first speaker for today, Nishtha Madan. Nishtha Madan works as an advisory researcher at IBM Research India. She primarily works on data for AI, fairness, and algorithmic bias. Her job responsibilities include designing and developing NLP and machine learning-based solutions for businesses. She has also been leading multiple academic research collaborations and has mentored 30-plus students. Her work has been covered by leading newspapers, blogs, and also featured in MIT Technology Review. She has co-authored several research papers published in renowned computer science journals and conferences. She has also delivered many talks and guest lectures at national and international venues like IIIT Delhi, VIT Amravati, North Cap University, DTU Delhi, EPFL Switzerland, GHCI Bangalore, FS Berlin, NUS Singapore, etc. Welcome, Nishtha. You can come on the stage now. Hi, Nishtha.
Hi, thanks Namrata for the great introduction, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm going to start my session. Hope I'm able to provide good insights to the speakers.
Yes,
Yep.
we are very sure you will. Your stage is yours. I'm gonna leave.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, so the obviously the idea of my talk is around how do you actually craft inclusive AI products, and obviously while working in a research and also on a lot of products, and we actually enable how do you actually build solutions using AI, and how do you actually enable solutions with AI. So with that, we have AI almost used in high stakes decision making applications. So you have AI added into credit-based applications for employment, where they're automated tools which are actually used to screen candidates. Then third is while admissions, since there are a lot of number of applications, so AI is really used to actually reject some applications upfront, and also for death sentencing also, right? Looking at some of the legal history of the person, looking at the crime that they have committed, etc. So sentencing is also decided by AI systems. So with this world, living in this world, obviously the prior thing that we want to make sure is the AI we are building is actually trustworthy and also is inclusive, so that it actually is not really biased towards a certain group or an individual or a class. So that is going to be the motivation of my talk, and we're going to, maybe let's take an example of how AI is really infused in credit, and how it can actually lead to some biased outcomes. So for example, let's take a bank, and let's take an example of how bank has an AI system which is used to actually say that I will actually decide if loan has to be granted to a certain candidate or not. So with such a decision that it has to make, a lot of times it gets biased with the data that we train AI systems on, and it sometimes learn that a certain part of the society can be actually on the basis of gender, it can be basis on races, and it somehow learns that you should not really grant loans to the certain category, and that is not really fair, and that is not inclusive. So so this is what we call as unwanted bias that really comes in AI applications, and that is nothing that is nothing. This bias, how do we really define this bias? So I'm just calling it as discrimination, and this we are saying that it becomes objectionable when it actually places certain groups at a privileged level, and they are having a systematic advantage, and there are certain groups that are at a systematic disadvantage. So this is also illegal. I mean, obviously this is leading to non-reliability, but also it might be illegal in a lot of cases where you can also file suit against sue the companies who are actually building these kind of systems. So with this, actually, it's really important to build inclusive AI products and which actually don't discriminate around gender, around race, or around physical disability, etc. Right? So the next thing is, where does it really come from? Where does this kind of bias really come from? So this unwanted bias in training data actually yields models and that scale out. So for example, the data you're feeding in, it might have less values for females and it might have a lot of values for males. So it learns, it has more diverse data or rich data to learn around males, and for females, maybe there were a few data points and they were not really substantial to actually make a prediction. So that actually leads to some faulty predictions. And since I'm taking example of gender, you can also consider it as a race, or you can consider it as a physical disability, and so on. So we are calling these as protected attributes. Okay, so I'm going to actually talk about a demo on AI Fairness 3. Our team collaborated with internal IBM US team, and then we have released an open source toolkit, which is called AI Fairness 360. And this toolkit contains around 9+ debiasing algorithms. How can you really debias some of your algorithms? And it contains around 30+ metrics to actually evaluate the fairness of a corresponding system. So this is really helpful, and maybe we can just see a demo of how it works and what all capabilities that it includes, and how it makes sure that a corresponding system or an algorithm is not biased around any attribute, any underrepresented or overrepresented attribute. So let us jump to the demo. Okay, so this is the demo URL. So anyone can access it. This is the URL, aif360.mybluemix.net. And I'm just going to click. So you have a lot of, you can look at the videos, you can just look at the paper, you can look at the tutorials, etc. I'm just going to move on to the demo tab. Okay, so one thing is AI Fairness 360 has all the capabilities for data which is in structured format. When I'm saying structured format, it is in Excel sheets or CSV files. So we have some sample data sets that we have that we are taking for demo, but you can actually add any kind of structured data where you have some predicted attributes and a prediction task that is to be done. So I'm taking an example of adult census income. So here the task is to predict whether income exceeds $50K per year based on census data or not. So here we have certain predicted attributes. One is race. So we have races white and non-white. So white are privileged races and non-white are unprivileged, since they actually get outcomes which sometimes it is learned and they should not really receive that outcome. And similarly on sex, male and female. Male is privileged here and female is unprivileged. And let's see how do we really detect bias and how do we really debias this data set. Okay, so moving on to checking. So there are certain metrics to check for the bias. So it is checking for the bias on this data set on different metrics. So around protected attribute race. So first of all, the task accuracy, where there is no mitigation applied, is around 83%. So this is, we have not applied any debiasing algorithm. This is the basic accuracy of the task, prediction task, where you're actually trying to predict if the income is greater than $50K per year or not. Okay. So here, when you say race, when we have this race factor, so we have certain matrix. These are the bias matrix, and each of the matrix have their different ranges, where we are saying that above this range or below this range, this leads to bias if this is the range. So we actually compare ranges of, since we have taken in this example predicted attribute as race. In race, we are taking white and non-whites, and we will really calculate the equal opportunity difference, that what is the opportunity difference between whites and non-whites, and then we will say if it is fair or if it is biased. Okay, so for each of the matrix, like, we also calculate statistical parity difference. where we say that if it is 0, if it is near 0, then it is fair. If it is going away from 0, then it is biased. Okay, and in this case it is minus 0.18. This is the way to read this graph. And then disparate impact. So for disparate impact also, there's a certain range that we define, and currently it is 0.55 in this sample, and we are saying that this is biased. And then there's a Thiel index that we also have, we also compute. This is 0.08 in this case. Similarly, around protected attribute sets, we have also calculated the similar matrix, all these matrix for this protected attribute. Now let's see how do we really, once we've detected, okay, disparate impact is 0.55, then how do we really mitigate this bias from the data and model? So we go next. So there are three kinds of techniques that we really use to do debiasing. Debiasing can be done at a data level, where we call these as pre-processing mitigation algorithms. Then at a model level, so a lot of times your data is unbiased, but model somehow learns some correlations, and it leads to some biased decisions. So we call this as in-processing mitigation algorithm. Then the third step is the post-processing algorithm, when you have actually deployed the model, but still then there is you need to do some post-processing on the output inference level. There is this bias, and after you've actually deployed it, so that's how it actually learns some bias in actually reinforcing some of the things. So that's where that is called post-processing algorithm, mitigation algorithm. So this is so there are a lot of algorithms, mitigation algorithms in this toolkit, and the code is available on GitHub. I'm going to take an example of take reweighing algorithm for the demo. It actually, what it does is it works on the data level, and it actually weighs examples combination to ensure that, so it actually weighs the non-whites higher than the whites, and it actually with these combinations it tries to actually make it more fair. So we do a reweighing, and we try to make sure that the weights are balanced for both the privileged and non-privileged classes. Okay, then I go next, I choose the algorithm. Now, let's compare the original versus mitigated results. Okay, so these are the original ones that are in gray, and the green ones are after the mitigation algorithm. So first thing is, after the mitigation, the accuracy is dropped to 82%. And then the matrix have also gone closer to fair. So earlier, more closer to 0 statistical parity is, the better it is. So it has, this matrix has reduced and moved to 0. Similarly, if you look at disparate impact, it has moved up more closer to 1, the better it is. So it is 0.74 now, earlier it was 0.55. And Thiel index is same, there's no change in the Thiel index. Similarly, on the protected attribute sets, it has disparate impact has risen to 0.51. So you have seen that there is a change in the matrix. So what we have done here is, and also the accuracy versus fairness trade-off is something that, that we decide while actually working with production systems, that I'm okay with 1% drop in accuracy, but I want to make sure that the predictions it is doing, it is not really biased. So that is a call that we need to take, that what is the trade-off, and there is a trade-off between these accuracy and fairness. But this is something that we have to get away with. So I think just to conclude, just to sum up, and also since we're out of time, I'm just going to summarize quickly that with this demo, obviously we have seen that how you can actually use in a corresponding algorithm, you can actually plug in the mitigation algorithms, and what is the really source of bias and how you can really remove it. And I think, yeah, so I think that's it. And there are obviously we are building new algorithms to mitigate these bias, and we are also working on some of the algorithms for text data sets. And that's it. And in case you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to write to me. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nisha. It was such a great talk, and it was so wonderful to have you join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And please, the audience can drop in the questions for Nishtha in the session chat. We have a Q&A after the next speaker, the combined Q&A for Kalika, Nishtha, and Vasudha, so our next speaker. Thanks, Nishtha.
Thank you.
I'm excited to introduce you to all the second speaker for this session, Vasudha. Vasudha is an engineer from NSIT New Delhi. She works at Microsoft as a technology strategist for data platform and artificial intelligence. She built partnerships across nationwide IT companies and startups and was responsible for implementing several AI solutions across FSI and manufacturing sectors. Hearing a strong passion for the impact sector, she now works with a non-profit called Vadvani AI to build AI for social impact. Her current work is to identify how AI can help alleviate poverty among small and marginal farmers. She's also working on a project to help cities predict the spread of COVID-19 and better manage healthcare demand. Over to you, Asada. I'm going to leave the stage to you.
Hi, thanks. Hi, thanks, Namrata. Great to be here. So I'll quickly jump in. All right, so we are talking about building inclusive AI products. I'm going to talk a little bit about how would that be relevant in the context of building AI for the next 5 billion. This title may seem a little bit confusing, but hold your horses and you'll be with me very shortly. So we've heard the fact that AI is everywhere, right? It's sort of a buzzword today. Everybody wants to study it. Everybody wants to take up a job in it. It's one of the highest paying jobs out there. But I'd really like us to take a moment to think and reflect about where all is AI really prevalent in our lives, in your and in my life. So the first thing that really comes to my mind is how when I'm buying products from e-commerce platforms, it's easily able to tell me what are the other products I would like, basis products I've already purchased. So, in the lockdown, I've been going all about shopping because I really enjoy that. And recently I thought of buying my first sari. And the recommendation told me that I would have to buy a petticoat along with it. And I had really no idea that those two things go together because it was my first time. So that was something that was really useful to me, right, as a consumer. Another area that comes to mind for everybody is riding a cab. Remember how excited we were when Uber Pool came up? We thought we could really travel really long distances at a very cheap price. How did this really happen? Uber could use AI to detect who are the people who are near us and who also want to travel to locations that are near us, and hence club us together in a manner that was efficient for us as well as efficient for Uber. Another example that comes to my mind is how easy it is for us to find people in our Google Images gallery, right? I don't really have a dog, but I really wish I did. Say, for example, though I did have a dog named Oliver, and I wanted to post a picture of him on his birthday, right? Now, I am a person who takes a lot of images, so my gallery is full of a lot of stuff. But I want to be able to easily find Oliver's image. I can do that if I've really tagged him before. And this is one of my favorites. AI has started to now understand me in a way that it's completing my sentences. So if any of you have used Google Keyboard before, you'll notice that more often than not, when you're typing out a sentence, it throws out a word that you can just use to sort of complete your sentence. So what do you think of, or what do you think about? Right? This is something it does. In fact, you all should really try this. If you have your phones around you, you should open WhatsApp, open any chat really, and just press the first, type any one word, and then you'll see 3 words. Just keep pressing on the middle button. Keep pressing it, keep pressing it, keep pressing it. And you'll see that an entire sentence has gotten formed, and that will sort of be similar to the way you actually speak. But is AI really everywhere? It is there very, very heavily in our lives, yes. But does that make it justify the word everywhere? Yeah, have you thought about that? I have an interesting fact for you. There are 7.2 billion people on this planet. It has only managed to reach 2.5 billion out of these. I'm not sure if a lot of you are familiar with the economic pyramid, but it is a way to segment populations basis their economic income. And if you notice here, about 63 or 64 approximately, 64% of the world's population earns less than 10,000 US dollars or less than 7 lakh per annum. And these are the kind of people which are even more prevalent in India because poverty is very prevalent in India. And AI hasn't really reached them. Why is that? Have you thought about why that would be the case? We all know that AI is a very high paying job, right? So who's able to invest in really creating AI services? Only those companies who have consumers who are willing to pay for these services, right? So you and I as consumers are able to pay for the rides, are able to pay for the orders. We make clicks on Google. And all of these are monetized for Google, for Amazon, for Uber. And that is how they're able to pay these data scientists or these AI engineers. So this often happens in any new technology, that there's an economic concept called the trickle-down effect that also navigates to technology. What is the trickle-down effect? It is when a new technology comes and you sort of pour it on the top glass. This is similar to the pyramid, right? You pour it to the top bucket of the economic pyramid, and it sort of spills over, reaches the bottom in some manner, reaches the middle, spills over a little bit more. And the only kind of service that is able to reach the bottom of the pyramid is that is sort of trickled over from the top. I have a lot to talk about farmers, but I haven't had the heart to write that on the slide today because it's really sad. 22% of Indian farmers live below the poverty line, whereas 21 is the national average of poverty in India. Farmers reportedly commit suicides due to being unable to make ends meet, despite being the contributor to the largest sector of the GDP, right? Agriculture. There are a numerous plethora of challenges that farmers face today that can in fact be benefited hugely from artificial intelligence. But instead of talking a lot about all of them, I'm going to delve deep into one of them that we worked on. Cotton farming is very widespread in India. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we went about building AI in order to solve for this. General challenges in pest management are sort of generic. All farmers are not educated in agriculture, so they don't have enough knowledge to best agricultural practices. And within pests specifically, there's a lot of influence of retailers. So retailers who sort of create certain pesticides are sort of biasing the opinion of a lot of farmers to overspray the amount of pesticide that's required. And this overspraying of pesticides not only damages their crops, but also increases their cost of production. So what's the scientific way of dealing with this problem, right? You can see this white structure. This is called a pest trap. This sort of emanates a few pheromones. And when pests smell these pheromones, they get attracted to the trap and they fall inside it and get trapped. So ideally, there's something called the economic threshold limit, or the ETL, which is described by agricultural science, which is nothing but the level of pest population that can be tolerated by a certain field. It's a sampling technique. So basically, this ETL needs to be monitored actively for each pest, which means that these farmers on a monthly or a bi-monthly basis need to sort of extract all the pests in their trap and see how many pests are there. If the number of pests is above the ETL, then they should take a certain action. And if it's below the ETL, they should not take a certain action. Now, this entire process is very cumbersome. Firstly, farmers don't know how to do it. Secondly, monitoring it regularly for them is very impractical because it requires training, it is difficult to practice, and is generally ignored by farmers. Farmers don't like to put in a lot of effort to do such things, or they're not educated enough to do it. Yeah. So what we did was we built an app wherein a farmer could simply empty all of these pests onto a paper, take an image of the paper, and upload it onto the app. So our app would detect what kind of pest is there, count the pest, compare it to the ETL, and accordingly give a pesticide recommendation. Yeah. I'm going to talk about the challenges we faced firstly with respect to building the AI. So I think all of us know that to build AI, we need data. And unfortunately, agriculture is a very, very data-starved environment. So what happens when you don't have data? You have to collect it. And collecting data is a very time-consuming and operationally heavy process. It took us about 6 months to get our first set of training data for this project. The second challenge we faced with respect to data was the quality of data. You can see an image on the left as well as one on the right. So once they have to sort of empty the pests on the paper, they ended up crushing a lot of the pests. So we couldn't really count them. Either that or they took the image when it was really dark. So the model could not really do the image contrast in order to detect the image. A lot of times farmers did not really have white papers to carry to the farm in order to empty the pest traps on it. So they would use their turbans. And then we would get these turban images, we would really not know what to do with it. So on an average, 25 to 30% of the data we received was not worth using for our models. And of course, the last bit is annotation. This is slightly technical, so I'll very briefly touch upon it. If you can, once we have an image, we sort of need to draw boxes around each object that we wish to detect, so that the AI model knows that this pest is in this area of the image, right? When we draw these boxes, we want it to be as close to the pest as possible and include as little of the white side as possible. So you see, this is what the AI detected. This is what the human expert annotated. It's pretty close, but the AI for this pest is sort of boxing it very close to the pest, whereas for this pest, it's kind of far away, right? So doing this manually was sort of a challenge. So anyway, once we built our first prototype for the algorithm, we were very excited to test it out. We were very excited for the farmers to start using it. And I'd like to talk a bit about the challenges farmers faced while using it. That's a bit unfortunate, but very quickly, a few challenges we faced while farmers consuming AI was that a lot of them do not have smartphones. A lot of them do not have internet connectivity. A lot of them do not really speak English, so we had to translate into their local languages. Another challenge is trust. They did not really trust our solution, or they trusted our solution way too much, which is not really good for them. And so we had to do a lot of UI designs, right? We noticed that farmers in rural India typically use WhatsApp and TikTok a lot. So we added the same icons, like of the camera and the gallery, that they were already familiar with, so they could use it easily. Similarly, they couldn't really use these drop downs because they were not familiar with the concept of drop downs, so we had to do away with that. Delivering impact. Okay, I'll quickly skip this. I'll move on to my concluding slide. I want to leave you all with the message of this, right? There's enough expertise in this world to solve problems. And what I mean when I say that is that there are enough doctors who know how to treat a problem. And there are enough agricultural experts who know how to deal with pests or lack of water, etc. But this information is not accessible to everyone, unfortunately. Can we do something? Can we build AI to help the bottom 5 billion people make expert level decisions? These are the kind of questions you want to be answering if you're interested in delivering social impact using AI. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vasudha. That was an amazing talk. And I think we all have questions in our head about how, and you've left us with such a, really inquisitive question, like to think about and to actually, it's amazing to know that 5 billion people are still not benefiting from AI, and we are having these issues that we need to solve to actually help them. So it was a great talk. Thank you, Vasudha, for sharing. And we're going to take questions now. So just stay on stage. I'm going to invite Nishtha and Kalika on stage as well. So we'll take questions together. What role do you think the government can play in ensuring that AI technologies reach the base of the pyramid?
Yeah, I'm really glad. I think I read that while I was waiting for people to join the stage. So you'd be happy to know that the official partner for our pest management work is the government of Maharashtra. In fact, a lot of the other projects we've taken up are on tuberculosis, the COVID work that we're doing. They're all very, very well received by governments. In fact, we were our lab, the Vadhvani Institute of Artificial Intelligence, we were inaugurated by Niti Aayog. So I think that's a very important question. There is nothing that we can do. There is nothing that technology alone can do for social impact. We have to partner with programs, with governments who are already working in the space, who know the landscape of challenges. And luckily enough, governments have been more receptive of this now. They've been more receptive. They've been more open to the idea that they need to now start taking charge of collecting better quality data. And so I think we're getting there. That's it.
Yeah. Thanks, Kalika, for sharing. So the next question I would like to ask is that to Kalika, how do you think that AI can help us with the Black Lives Matter movement going on currently?
Particularly Black Lives Matter. I think there are lots of things that we can do on the AI side. All the three aspects that I talked about, users, algorithms, as well as data. We have to very, very carefully look into all the three aspects of it as far as Black Lives Matter, because if you look at a lot of literature around it on racism and technology, you find that I think Nishtha made this point that sometimes with the data, models will make certain correlations which are not really favorable and not the kind of things that we want to look at. And if you look at some of the work that's been done in, say, Harvard and MIT, you will find that there's a lot of discrimination in technology towards Black people. So just recognizing and acknowledging that, and then working to kind of do away with it, and looking at things from the data perspective as well as technology perspective to do away with it. All has to be done. Other than, of course, like, using technology to spread the word. It's a
Thank you.
problem is much more crucial and much more intense. Yeah.
I agree, Kalika. It is much more crucial and more like convoluted. So the next question is for Nishtha. Nishtha, what are the strategies or ways in which we can make our data more inclusive and therefore in turn help make AI more inclusive?
Okay, that's a good question. And actually, there are a couple of strategies where, obviously people try to make sure that data is inclusive, but specifically around certain protected attributes like, which are sensitive, like gender or, race or some other attributes like age. So, for example, I took a loan issue where, for if a person is less than, say, certain age, like 25, even if their income is very high, the automated reply would be to reject the loan. Because, if the age is too high, then also it's high likely. And that has been seen in a lot of experiments. So, I would say that one way is to really have a data which is diverse enough to actually contain all these possibilities in the data and specifically around these protected attributes. And I think that is one way to actually debias the data. Other ways, obviously you can undersample or oversample some of these data sets, and there are some techniques around that. So that is another way to actually, make sure your data is consistent. So that is what I feel that could have been done as a first step. So where you can actually work with your data to actually make it more meaningful and more diverse, so that when you are actually deploying an application, you're not really relying on some data which has been dumped and then you're just directly using that. Instead, you actually look at all these attributes and see that you have a balance of these rather than, just a few columns for females or, just actually training on that. So I think that's something that can be done.
Thank you, Nishtha, for that answer. I hope that provides some insight to the person who has asked this question on how they can make their data more inclusive. So I think we are on time, and thank you to all the wonderful speakers and the wonderful audience that's been there, and the amazing questions. Thank you so much for all of your time, and any more questions you have for the speakers, please do reach out to them. We'll post their LinkedIn links here, group, so they can connect with them and can chat with them more. And I would again like to thank all the speakers for their valuable time and effort and coming and joining us. It was really great having you here. And please, I would urge the audience to go visit the Women in AI booth and register to become a member. And the India chapter is looking for volunteers, so do reach out to me if you have any questions about the Women in AI India chapter. And thank you so much for attending. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.